Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of What You Gotta Say. Today, the title is The Black History You Don't Know. And there are a great deal of reasons. And I've got two incredible guests with a wealth of knowledge. So, now this is recorded. So I am sorry if you wanted to call in and pick their brains. But sorry, I got them all to myself today. We'll have them on again for everybody. And we're going to discuss the history, the Black history that you don't know in 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
Your small business struggled through the pandemic to stay afloat. You need more exposure. Radio and printed ads are good for pet liners. Television commercials are overpriced. Social media ads start cheap, end up expenses. You need an ad team that can get you multimedia exposure. You need MyTV. MyTV will develop a commercial tailored to your business. To get your maximum sales, contact sales@theratemytv.church.
And welcome back. Now, I am honored to have my guests today. These two gentlemen are the author of the book, the novel. Listen, I wouldn't be surprised if this actually became a mini series. I mean, the name of the book is called Black History 365, an actual and true account of American history. With me today are the authors, Joel Freeman and Dr. Walter Milton. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Excellent. We're doing really well. Thank you, Vincent, for having us on your show today.
Okay. Joel, how are you?
I'm doing great.
All right. So let's dive into this. This is a big book. How did this masterpiece come to fruition?
Well, it came to fruition because I think it was a vision that was seeded in my life a long time ago. And I'm quite sure that Joel shares similar sentiments. But when I was a fourth grader, I remember attending school and I had a really deep love for my teacher. And she said, tomorrow we're going to be learning Black history. I'm going to teach you guys some Black history. And I was excited. Went home and told my mother and father, I said, hey, Miss Laudicea is teaching us about Black history. You know, my parents, you know, they would always tell us that our history goes back to the beginning of time, that our history was biblical history. And I was really confident in that. So, you know, that morning I woke up, I told my mother I wanted to put my favorite blue suit on. Actually, it was my only blue suit, my only suit, period, and my snap-on tie. So I went to school. I made sure that I was sitting in the front seat that day, in the front row rather, and I was on the edge of my seat. And she showed the film strip, and the first thing that I saw was an introduction into slavery. There was a so-called slave master beating an enslaved person with a whip. For my fourth grade brain, it was like shock. I wanted to hide under a table because it really contradicted everything that my parents said. I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't, you guys left the part of the story out or something. So I went home. I was really
suffering from PTS.
Yeah, PTSS, right. I wasn't argumentative because I didn't want to get a spanking, but
yeah,
kind of confrontational softly. And my mother and father saw that, especially my mother saw that I was really emotional. And she told me that one day we're going to write this story. And so fast forward, I was a school superintendent for a little over 13 years. And I met Joel when I was a superintendent in Illinois. We stayed in touch over the years. As he says, almost 2 decades. And so I just started telling the story. I started writing and writing. I started thinking about all of the atrocities academically that many Black children were having across this country. And I said, many of our kids, they're out of the curriculum. They don't see themselves in the curricula. They learn a curricula that excludes them. And then there's a smidget of information on Black History Month. So just started writing. My mother said that I was going to do this, and my mother died that week when she planted that seed in me again, unexpectedly. So I started the work, and then I said, let me call Joel. Joel has images. Oldest image dates back many years ago, 1553. I said, hey man, will you be down with me on this project? Would you meet with me? He flew to Nashville, Tennessee. I was living there at the time, and we haven't looked back since. So we put together this wonderful book. We call it Our Love Letter to the World. And it's just amazing. So that's how the vision started. It started from my own experience, but also what I recognize that many children across this country, Black and white, but particularly Black children, really, really needed in public schools and private schools and Christian schools and religious schools, all charter schools. And so here we are. And it's not only for young people. We say that it's from K to grade.
Okay. Black history in public school. The newest thing that they added, and the Black history in public school was always the same people. Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, George Washington Carver, Frederick Douglass. I think, oh, by the way, 2008, they added Barack Obama, and some of them had to tape his picture to the old history book. I mean, I was shocked. In fact, growing up in public school in Philadelphia, I was a little bit militant. And I expressed to them, because my uncle was a African Black history studies major. And I mean, like you, I was getting the real stuff. So when it came to Black history in school, I was thoroughly upset. So I guess that's what you were feeling?
Yeah, I think upset at some points in my life probably would be an understatement.
Okay, all right. So what's the difference between your book and the 1619 Project?
I'll have fun with that question, but I'll turn it over to Joel and let him.
Jump on it, Walter. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Joel. I'll let you. I'll follow up.
Well, a little bit, just kind of a quick overview. I came from Canada. I left home when I was 17, long-haired hippie, dope-smoking fool, and just kind of traveling all around North America. Probably put 5,000 or 6,000 miles in this thumb right here. And I had an experience in my life in '72 that turned my life around. Signed up for school the next day, and about 7 years later, I have a picture of myself with hair down my shoulders. And 7 years later, I became one of the first chaplains in the history of the NBA. I started studying Black history right around 1980. That's about 42 years now. Real intensive study. Started doing speeches around 92, 93 timeframe, and just became a situation where, my time in the NBA really helped to open up the door for me to become, just kind of open to different things that I hadn't known before, and bumped into Ivan Van Sertima. And he became my mentor from a historical background. And a lot of the players in the NBA, we had many conversations, many discussions. And it just, and then meeting Walter, Walter was, I don't know, he didn't mention this, but he was for 6 years or 5 years a social studies teacher, for 6 years a principal, and then close to 14 years as a superintendent. In fact, he was in the capital district of Springfield, Illinois, a very plum position. Worked
In
in
a
New
very majority white neighborhood.
York, Flint, Michigan, and other places. But he, when we met, it was just like we connected just like that. And then when he called me, he had already been working on the project, and so when he called, it just was, hey Walter, let's do this. You had me at hello, so to speak. And little did we realize it took 2.5 years. Even our wives don't really fully understand how crazy it was. But it was 12, 16-hour days, like Groundhog Day, every day, every day, every day, every day. If that starts getting boring and repetitious, that's exactly what we were experiencing on a whole nother level. And then what came out was this book here, weighs 5.5 pounds, has 1,248 pages. It has images throughout. In fact, you can open up pretty much anywhere, and there's images throughout, and 1,200 QR codes. And now we also have the different class sets for 7th grade. As you can see here, we have 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 8th grade, all the way from, 3rd to 8th grade and all. We have all these textbooks, and we'll have kindergarten through 2 coming up here in probably by the beginning, sometime in June. 1619, how we are not really interested in trying to pick a fight with anybody, any ideology. We are setting our own weather pattern. They say that time is the best friend of truth, and in time, what our curriculum is all about will begin to emerge like a Polaroid snapshot. And we built everything around 2 words that have not been utilized very much. One is truth-centric, and the second one is solutionist. And so we have 4 things that we want to invite people to. Any reader, as Walter said, engages all ages from K to Gray, is that we want to invite them, number 1, to become a critical thinker. Number 2, a compassionate listener. Number 3, a fact-based, respectful communicator. And then the fourth one is built upon the first 3 to become an action-oriented solutionist. So that's really what we're all about. And 1619, CRT, 1776 project, all these different things, the term anti-racist, abolitionist. We really don't want to get into a war of definitions, because it seems like these definitions are changing almost on a weekly basis. And so we just have something that was truth-centric, that's the razor's edge. And Walter is, because this is his lived experience as a Black man in America. I can only hear about it. I can only read about it. And even if I had my features changed to look Black, like John Griffin did in 1960, I still would have a white consciousness, and on top of that, a Canadian consciousness, which makes me a little weird here in the United States.
You'd be a Black man with a Canadian accent. Yes. Okay, Dr. Milton, you're a school superintendent. You went up through the public school system. Why does public school have such a marginalized view of Black history?
We can't hear you, Walter.
Okay, thanks, Joe. One of the things that I discovered is that we have to do a much better job of differentiating schooling from education. What I believe is that many of our students have been just indoctrinated with schooling. And as a result of the schooling, they don't have the ability or they haven't experienced this whole construct of liberation. And when I talk about liberation, I'm not only talking about from understanding who you are, but I'm talking about with that understanding of who you are and how that prepares you to be self-sufficient, how that prepares you to be, just understanding yourself and helping your community and being really dedicated to that at hand, because you understand that you come from greatness. And I think that if our students across this country had that understanding that they come from greatness, I think that the academic trajectory would really change overnight. And I believe that if anyone else had our history, it would be front page news every day. And
Well,
so I think that some of this is by design, if you will. I really do.
the corporation of white supremacy rears its ugly head.
Absolutely. And it's a business. If we're going to talk frank today, we have to really understand that when we have young people that are marginalized, then they don't have the necessary ability to matriculate through, the vicissitudes. Had they had the information to matriculate, the outcome for them would be a lot better. And
So
so, I'm sorry.
let me see if I got this right. The schematic approach is to, one, not talk about their greatness, two, not show images so that they can relate to their greatness, and three, sweep under the rug the contribution of that greatness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If we're going to be frank today, and I think that
Yeah.
this is a frank show.
Yes.
So I agree with you 100%. But I think it's by design, because what we find is that there's a direct correlation, with students under or receiving a culturally responsive educational experience, with them doing better socially, academically, politically, psychologically, in every aspect of life. We found. And so what we want to do is have a pedagogical emphasis that's really tied to this whole notion of culturally responsive educational approaches. And that's what we do.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Joel, help me out here. They can't be responsible on those levels because they can't really handle the truth of the tragedy of actual slavery.
Well, what we did in our curriculum is that we have not blinked at all from the truth. So, for instance, let's say we want to talk about. Let's say we have a group of students, a mixture of students, because as our subtitle says, this is an inclusive account of American history. And even the icons, the images, we have Black, Puerto Rican, white, Asian, Hispanic. We have all different ethnicities and races that are pictured as young students throughout the whole textbook. And so this is our love letter to the whole world, the whole country, not just 50% living in their own confirmation bias bubbles. And so when it comes down to it, wherever there's a binary choice, we developed a process which is unique to us, which is proprietary, called the elephant experience. Walter and I, we really wrestled with how do we talk about these tough topics where people get all weirded out, they bump each other in the head, they talk past each other, they cancel each other on social media. And so we walk straight into topics like 3/5 of a human being, Uncle Tom, reparations, the N-word, should we tear the statues down, Black people in the deadly dance with both American political party machines, scientific racism, can a white person ever fully understand the Black experience in America, manifest destiny, doctrine of discovery, all these different topics. Wherever there's a binary choice, we have QR codes that show both sides, so that once again, if we were just speaking to one side, we would just be sharing one side. And that's all about teaching people what to think, not how to think. And we're all about the Socratic method. We're all about, just getting students to come to some type of an understanding. In Debate 101, you have to know both sides before you can effectively debate one side.
Correct.
So, that's really what we're all about with this particular curriculum.
So we got a great deal of American history that is basically one-sided or told by the winners or the people with enough money to buy politicians.
Walter?
But hold on, we're going to answer that question because we're running a little late, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. So we're going to come to that right after this break. I will see you all in 1 minute, 2 seconds.
Your small business struggled through the pandemic to stay afloat. You need more exposure. Radio and printed ads are good for pet liners. Television commercials are overpriced. Social media ads start cheap, end up expenses. You need an ad team that can get you multimedia exposure. You need MyTV. MyTV will develop a commercial tailored to your business. To get your maximum sales, contact sales@theratemytv.church.
Okay, so I left you with a cliffhanger. And Dr. Milton,
Yes.
oh, you can address that question.
Well, I want you to repeat the question if you can, because I was so captivated by what you said. I thought it was a statement.
Okay, the Corporation of White Supremacy has marginalized and basically dismissed the influx of African Americans or Americans of African descent, or whatever they call themselves these days, because this is the cancel culture, is a majority of that, and writing your book and putting it together as a love letter, is a majority of that to ease white guilt?
No, not at all. Actually, that was never part of our conversation. And I think that by Joel and I doing this, we are antithetical to what people envision for a book of this ilk to be completed by the type of people. So if I can, before I answer that question, I want to give you a backdrop. So we were driving one night, we were in Illinois, and we're driving over to St. Louis to catch catch a flight. And so it was about 2 or 3 in the morning, and those are normal hours for me and Joel, just coming off doing this work. So, because we, work 12, 16 hours. And I said, hey, Joel, I said, man, just one thing of one person that you would describe that you will be in history, who would that person be? He said, John Brown, just like that. Wow, man, because I'm Nat Turner. And so, so just imagine John Brown and Nat Turner doing this work. And so that's what you have. And so we have a section in the book called Both Political Parties is a Deadly Dance, for Black people, basically. And so we wanted to be really, really clear. We looked at two phases. We looked at Afrocentric approaches, Afrocentric history. We looked at Eurocentric approaches, Eurocentric history. And what we said we're going to do is that we're going to write from a truth-centric construct. And so everything that we do is based on truth-centrism. And so what it does, some of the information is very shocking to people. For example, we said that we're going to be very different. We're going to start from ancient Africa, and we're going to come all the way past George Floyd. we said that we're going to have technology integrated into the textbooks because people are really, connected to technology. Then we said that we're going to have music to the book. So, Joel and I had a chance to go down to Atlanta. We had a great meeting with the young man, Dr. Kevin K.O. Cates. He's award Grammy nominated producer.
Grammy.
Yeah, he produced for Jay-Z, T.I., Drake, Snoop Dogg, and a host of others. Rick Ross. I mean, he knows these guys. You can just pick up the phone and call them. They're all music.
Man.
We have 40 songs that are embedded or that are connected to the textbook. So we wanted to make sure that we were pulling people in from all angles. So there's no excuse to be denied this information because we did our work. And what we say is that we were nothing but vessels that God ordained to do this work. We were nothing but tools. That's all.
Well,
That's all we were. Tools.
I can tell you this, Dr. Milton, the soundtrack from this mini series is going to be off the hook. In fact, I'm going to have your people call my people. We're going to make this mini series happen.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So your mother told you Black history is actually the start of evolution. Now, I'm writing my thesis on that, and a lot of people have been considering me to be radical. So can you help me out?
Well, I can do more than help you out. I go back to our foundation. We deal with truth, and sometimes, truth and a lie, they don't
share the same space.
However, the truth always rises to the top, and I think that we're living in a day and time where we're at the top, and truth is coming to join us.
You mean the awakened generation?
Absolutely. I really think that we have to tell the truth. But when we tell the truth, we have to make sure that we connect it in a way so that we're not denouncing anyone to elevate someone else.
But what I love about your book is that you do tell the truth, but you also give them hope.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, part of this, if I could hitchhike off that, is that, we have all heard the term knowledge is power, the phrase. What we'd like to say is knowledge is power, but also wisdom is power, because wisdom, a good running definition of wisdom perhaps is wisdom is the application of knowledge. So it's an occupational hazard. We have to gain knowledge in order to have something to apply in the form of wisdom. But in the DNA of knowledge is arrogance, all elbows, pride, ego, all the rest of it. And we all have to chart through that knowledge part. And then it seems like we get the stuffings knocked out of us. And then the wisdom somehow is there to be poured out. But we have to have the knowledge first. So we're not interested in just waking people up, even though that's a part of this whole curriculum. It's how do you process this so it's not about beating someone else up in a debate saying, I know more than you, or you didn't know this. It's about patience and kindness. It's about listening. It's about speaking in a respectful manner. It's about healing, not bringing more divisiveness. And that's really what that's bound up in the DNA of what we've created.
So one of the biggest things about the Big Bang Theory versus evolution is that the Big Bang Theory is more Eurocentric. Because in terms of the Big Bang Theory, man or Lucy was basically in Europe. And here's one of the things that gets me. It blows people's mind to find out biblically that God created a man in the Garden of Eden, the first man, and he's African.
Yeah, there's you have the mitochondrial DNA, and then the Y chromosome. You have mother to daughter, father to son, and the mitochondrial DNA is, we know Eve in the good book says that she is the mother of all living. And she had to be a Black woman, an African woman. She had to be Black because the lighter melanin content of skin comes from darker, not the reverse. And so when you look at the mitochondrial DNA from generation to generation, and I don't know about pan theory, Pangea, when you look at the world as kind of like pieces of a puzzle, and how South America fits into Africa and Australia and all these
Platelets,
different things, and how
Asia, and all of
people
them, and then the
separate.
explosion and
Yeah,
separation. Yes.
who knows? Who knows? I mean, we can't verify any of that, but
Mhm.
however the gene flow emerged around the world, it had to have come from a Black woman.
Yeah. And
Well,
I'm sorry.
geneticists will prove you to be right because everyone has a portion of that black DNA in their
It's the
genes.
common Eve theory.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the things that really stuck out to me, because when I see a scripture, the book of Genesis 5:2, it really makes me think. It says, "In male and female, he created them and blessed them and called their name Adam in the day when they were created." And so, and if we look at, where life first started, the Fertile Crescent, the Garden of Eden, so we have to look towards East Africa. And I think that that's where we all herald from. And,
Mhm.
and we have to understand that may not be pretty to some people, but it's the truth. The truth sometimes is not packaged pretty. Sometimes a lie looks a lot better than the truth, but we must deal in truth. And I think if we get to the core of dealing truth, that's when we have hope. That's when we all become merchants of hope, to carry hope for a greater and better day.
Okay. So, creation, black woman, birth of the world. How does now the Bible actually talks about that huge period of migration from Africa to the four corners of the world? It was called what was that called? Oh, the Tower of Babel.
Well, Genesis chapter 10, it goes into the table of nations. You have 70 nations that emerged from Adam and Eve,
Mm-hmm.
and you have Ham, Shem, and Japheth. You have the sons of
Noah.
Ham and Japheth and Shem, and you can see the gene flow moving from Japheth moving into Europe. We have Shem in the Saudi Arabia, that region. You have Ham. You have the sons of Mizraim, which literally means in the Hebrew two Egypts.
Mm-hmm.
You have Put, which is Libya. You have Cush, which is Ethiopia.
Ethiopia,
That whole region, and then Canaan or Canaan. You have that
the
curse
promised land.
was not on Ham; it was on Canaan.
Canaan, yeah.
And if you pick up the newspaper today, Libya still exists, Egypt still exists, Ethiopia still exists, but where's Canaan? And so there was, the whole curse was not on Ham. It was on Canaan for what he did.
Yeah. And another thing that's really important, like we hear the term Middle East, there's really historically not a such thing as that. And if we look at, there has been, there's a lot of conversation now amongst, especially Black people here in America on, were we really historically descendants of Shem or Ham, because Shem
or
and
Ham.
Ham looked alike. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is a school of thought saying that we are closely connected to Shem, that we're more Shemitic than Hamitic. And I think that if we can have clarity around that, then we can basically have a fundamental conversation and closing some of the diaspora gaps that we have as Black people around the world.
But
All
we do
right.
know that there's the Lemba people in Zimbabwe,
Mhm.
and an anthropologist by the name of Tudor Parfit, from South Africa. He had heard about the Lemba men who claimed to have DNA that goes back to Israel,
Israel.
to that region of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and according to their history, their oral history, is that after the Assyrians came through some 2,500 years ago, they were pushed to Yemen. A famine occurred, and they ended up in Sana'a, Yemen. And then on the east coast of Africa, you have the trade winds blowing north to south 6 months out of the year, and then south to north is 6 months out of the year. So they got on the trade winds down all the way to Zanzibar, and they believe their forebears actually built Great Zimbabwe. And then they did the DNA test, and they found out that they were actual members of the Kohanim, which is our direct descendants of Aaron. So it's there's a lot of things out there. Where things are silent, I refuse to be dogmatic, but it's always wonderful to roll up the sleeves and start talking about these things, because I think it's important to understand and to think outside of the norm in these areas
Now,
as much as possible.
Go ahead, Doctor.
I was going to
Go ahead.
recommend two good books to read by a gentleman by the name of Rudolph Windsor. One is called From Babylon to Timbuktu. I'm saying in terms for your research, and also The Valley of the Dry Bones.
Had that one. Now,
And
I've got a
book. Can I mention another book?
Go ahead.
By Thomas Oden. He talked about how Africa shaped the Western Christian mind. Very fascinating book. Thomas Oden, Oden.
Okay, and we're going to dive into the African Christian mind shape and a little African ingenuity. And I want to leave everyone here with this question, and our experts are going to answer it. Where was the first castle built? And we're going to figure that out in 1 minute. See you. Grab a snack. Hurry up back.
Your small business struggled through the pandemic to stay afloat. You need more exposure. Radio and printed ads are good for pet liners. Television commercials are overpriced. Social media ads start cheap, end up expenses. You need an ad team that can get you multimedia exposure. You need MyTV. MyTV will develop a commercial tailored to your business. To get your maximum sales, contact sales@theratemytv.church.
And welcome back. Hope you got your snacks ready. So, everybody out there, where was the first castle built? Let's hear it. You're wrong. Gentlemen.
Go ahead, Walter.
No, you go ahead, Joel. I'll come after you.
But it's just, one of the things that people looked at when they discovered it, or found it, I should say, is Great Zimbabwe, which we talk alluding to the Lemba people. They say that their forebears actually built it. What is fascinating about Great Zimbabwe is that it is the rocks. There's no mortar in the entire structure. Sure. And I would say to anybody, go out, build a stone fence, watch the earth move over, let's say 20, 30 years, and that stone fence will be toppled over, But somehow in the structure of Great Zimbabwe, it has stayed intact all these centuries. It's just fascinating.
And people are still claiming that the greatest engineering marvel that is Africa in Africa were the pyramids.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Absolutely.
And that, the pyramids, when Napoleon came there, some guy got out his pencil and figured it out that all the stone, in fact, we now know also where the quarry, where they quarried that stone. A friend of ours is Dr. James Harrell, retired from the University of Toledo. He's probably the greatest, has the greatest understanding of that kind of thing. But all the stone on the Giza Plaza, if it were cut up into rocks, into stone wall, you could build a wall around the entire country of France, 1 foot wide and 10 feet tall. That gives you an idea of the volume of stone. And one historian said it could have taken 20 years, and with let's say 100,000 workers working around the clock, the one stone would have to been put in place with a mathematical perfection of 1/1000th of an inch between each stone every 96 seconds. And that gives you an idea of
how fast they were working.
Engineering marvel.
Wow. So, all right. So, Black ingenuity, all right, that has affected the Western world. One is that, yeah, they were incredible mathematicians. In fact, the Library in Alexandria is still bigger than the Library of Congress. But and it has a great deal of facts that have been boggling people forever. But the African experience also expanded the concept of monotheism, or the belief of one God of your understanding.
Walter, you want to?
I think the richness of our true culture is that we're not monolithic. I think as we begin to evolve and grow and go, it really became that, if you will. But I know that we have a plethora of different beliefs, but it has always been an essential component for our existence that there was a creation, that there was a power, a creator that's bigger than us. And so I think that if you talk about the creative concept from an ancient standpoint, we had the belief and understanding of the ancient God of Yahweh, by the name of Yahweh, and that's how we really begin to keep that with us as we had some of the challenges. I mean, if you look at certain things in the Old Testament Bible, they're very similar to our lives, to our experiences, to our existence. And so I think that this whole concept and the notion of God has always been a relevant and viable force amongst us as a people.
Yeah, I mean,
if I could hitchhike off that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Also, we have a situation where we just take a look at the dynasties of Egypt, and we start looking at the polytheistic view of the Egyptians, and that was the worship of the Amun. And then you have Akhenaten coming on the scene, a rather just a crazy, just a whole different mindset. And he brought in the whole idea of the Aten, which was the worship of the sun disk, the sun god. But it was a monotheistic view, not a polytheistic view. The religious people at the time, the priests, they freaked out under his rule. But whether one believes in the 1290 BC date of the Exodus or the 1440 BC date of the Exodus, the 18th dynasty is probably the most important of all the dynasties from a biblical perspective, because you can see the cross section. You can see in which dynasty, for instance, that Abraham entered into Egypt, and then all the different Joseph, and then the Exodus happening in the 18th dynasty. And so in Acts it says that Moses was raised in all the wisdom of Egypt. And when you parse that phrase in the Greek, and you see the wisdom of Egypt was at the time of Moses was a monotheistic view. That it was the wrong trajectory, but it was still a monotheistic view. And some theologians and historians believe and concur that perhaps Moses was prepared for a monotheistic view in being raised in all the wisdom of Egypt under a time of the Aten, which is the monotheistic view of the sun disk. And then when he found the Jehovah, the God of Israel, that he was prepared mentally, emotionally, and spiritually for a monotheistic view.
So it was the right church, just the wrong pew.
Well, I think that if we look at it again, I was reading the other day. I was reading a scripture in the book of Acts, Acts 7:6. And it says, and God spoke on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land, that that they should bring them into bondage and entreat them evil for 400 years. So when you hear that, it seems like it's quite similar to our experiences. But when I think
400 years of slavery.
when I think of in terms of various aspects of Christianity, if you will, some of it is very similar to the whole notion of Horus and Isis. The virgin, birth and all of those things, that are quite similar. But I think we have to also deal with the canonization of various parts of religion around Christianity, things that took place through the Nicene Council or the Nicene Creed. When they met and they said, okay, by force, we're going to canonize these kinds of things, because many of those beliefs of that magnitude was outside of our existence when many of our ancestors came here through the whole process of being enslaved.
So we're going to come back and we're going to dive into that wonderful thing, period of American history, and find out that it wasn't just in America. And we're going to do that in just 1 minute.
Your small business struggled through the pandemic to stay afloat. You need more exposure. Radio and printed ads are good for pet liners. Television commercials are overpriced. Social media ads start cheap, end up expensive. You need an ad team that can get you multimedia exposure. You need MyTV. MyTV will develop a commercial tailored to your business. To get your maximum sales, contact sales@theratemytv.church.
And welcome back. The show is titled The Black History You Don't Know. And I've got incredible guests, and I keep saying this, but the best part of my show is what the show during the breaks. One day I'm actually going to record that and put it on. But now we talked about the contribution, monotheism, to the Western society. Also, we talked about the African ingenuity, the pyramids as an engineering marvel. Yet they, in the history books, they never talk about they were castles built in Africa, predating hundreds of years before the great castles of Europe. But another thing that Africa was incredibly known for, especially during the 1600s, commerce, trade, wealth, natural resources that the entire world wanted. Let's start with what? Ivory was the first real big one. Joel? Dr. Milton?
Yes, that was one of them. But one of the things that we wanted to make sure we clarified in the textbook is that when we looked at Africa, we started with the ancient empires. And we also gave extreme clarity of how those empires were broken into this geopolitical names of countries or what have you into the continent of Africa. And when I talk about, because I have a son, his name is Izana Haben, and he's named after one of the ancient Ethiopian kings of an area called Aksumite. And he
Very wealthy.
responsible, yeah, for the whole, a coin creation of coins and the minting of
Yeah, in
coins.
fact, he was considered the richest man in the world.
Yeah, that's someone else. We'll get to him too.
Okay.
That's because we can never talk about ancient wealth if we don't talk about him. But
Right.
the point I'm trying to make is that people don't realize that coffee really came from there. And,
What?
yeah,
Not Colombia?
yes, yes.
Oh, Ted Cruz, are you watching this? Now you know why she didn't want your coffee. Okay.
So when we talk about commerce and everything, it really started there in ancient Africa. Yep. And Joel, I'll let you talk about our beloved brother was one of the richest men of all time.
Yeah, Mansa Musa.
Mansa Musa, yes.
There's only one evidence of how he looked. Who knows what he actually looked like, but it's pictured in the textbook. And he was the wealthiest. He didn't fight wars. He bought people off with gold, and he would journey, and he would be magnificently bless a community where he would stay, and just a remarkable human being.
Mhm.
But I think that
But it was told that when he traveled, his caravans had so much gold that he can buy any country that he went into.
That's right. That's right. That's how he fought his wars. Hey, I'll buy you. I'll buy this region. And you have the gold in West Africa, in Ghana especially. You have the ivory trade, which was a lot of what happened in the Arab slave trade, is that people would come into, and Vincent, you and I were talking about this yesterday, and how Egypt was first. The Arabs took over Egypt during what they call the golden era of Islam. They took over Egypt, and then it took them 60 years to make it all the way to through these other areas of the lands of Libya and other places, all the way to Morocco and the Atlantic coast of Africa. And then every village, every city, they said you must pay tribute in people that are kidnapped and enslaved. And soon that ran out. And so then people started going into Central Africa, the Chad region, the West African region. And then you had these coffles of people marching out to either Morocco, which was a slave port, or Zanzibar, which is a slave port on the East Coast. And you can see images of them carrying ivory with them as they go out, and then they were sold into enslavement from there. So there's a lot of, and even today, you have the Chinese are doing a lot of infrastructure work in payment for potash and diamonds and gold and oil and all the rest of it. So Africa, the whole continent of Africa, is filled with natural resources.
But the biggest natural resource that really took its prominence in the late 16, early 17 was the resource of manpower, or better known as slavery.
Well,
okay, don't jump at once.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I wanted to put on mute, but yeah, you're 100% right. And there was evidence that those individuals who came here had the ability, they had the propensity to build this nation. And that's exactly what we did. We participated into the building of America. And I think that it took a lot of ingenuity. It took a lot of skill sets. Many of the people that many of our ancestors that came here had skills. They were not these people running around in Africa without skills. The challenge was that we didn't speak the language, the English language, but we had the skill sets. I mean, if you look at DC, I mean, a lot of the relics, we're responsible for those things. You look at
but you look at the man who designed DC was black, exactly. And he did it all without using paper.
That's right.
From memory.
From memory.
Yeah, we go back to your old city, So Philadelphia, one of the oldest cities in the country. So, and we have to remind young people that they come from greatness, that they have DNA, their DNA is full of mathematics. They know science. It's really in them. You know, they're melanin. We have to teach them how all of that is connected to God and how it's all connected to the great development of civilization. And I really believe that if we made sure,
Creativity.
yes, that this was an essential component of the educational process, we can change the dynamic of this great country overnight.
So did they really, the post or the Reconstruction period, okay, the 40 acres and a mule that never happened? I mean, did they really reconstruct the former slaves into America properly or right or anything besides saying, okay, get out?
We have a
No.
whole section on 40 acres and a mule. It's part of our elephant experience, and there's just a lot of just twisted history during that period of time. Sherman, running through Atlanta, and just breaking up the infrastructure of the South.
Mm-hmm.
African people who were captivated, kidnapped, following them, and trying to see how they could be made be free or experience the freedom, and then the trickery involved with that. It just was a terrible time. The 40 acres and a mule, that was promised, and then the next president who came in after Lincoln was assassinated, and the Congress, they rescinded all that, and so it's just terrible.
Henceforth, the term vice president back then wasn't a bromance that we experience now. The vice president was the second runner-up in the presidential election. So no, those two didn't share the same ideas, Lincoln and his predecessor. So after he was shot, he said, 40 acres and a what? No.
No,
Give
yeah,
all of those plantation owners back their property.
yeah.
But
One of the things that's important, and we have to understand, we have a song called The Civil War, and it talks about it's complicated. And I think that if Abraham Lincoln had the chance to save the Union without ending slavery,
he would have.
Yeah, that's a great, exactly. So I really think that we have to be very forthright and provide due diligence, like Joel said, because that was a very, very difficult and crazy time in our history. And that led up to the question now that many people are having: was integration a death sentence or was it a blessing?
Well, the same thing or the same theory and concept goes with colonization of Africa. Was it a death sentence or was it a blessing? But here's the thing. During history, the duality or the duplicity of our leaders have always been faced with doing what was fundamentally right and doing what was incredibly popular. Even though Lincoln did not want to end slavery, and it was very popular for him not to end slavery, but his choice was, okay, fundamentally right, they're going to continue warring. So what he wanted to do was actually just stop the carnage and the bloodshed, more than he actually wanted to free the slaves. I mean, that's my opinion. What did you guys see?
Well, his goal was to really preserve the Union, to keep the country intact.
No.
And this whole notion of slavery was front and center. It really was. And I think that, some people say that that was prophecy being fulfilled. And so, but we spent a lot of time talking about, that in the book, and we unpack each one of those really, I would say, Joel, I don't know if you agree with me, but those very difficult matters that took place during that time. And we really did our due diligence around this topic here.
Yeah, well,
I think also another factor is that anyone who is a leader is flawed. We all, from a biblical standpoint, have clay feet, and there's complexities, complications, and just some weird stuff sometimes. People who made I mean, you just look at JFK, he's up in many homes around the country. His
Yeah,
picture.
with Martin Luther King's picture.
Yes. And yet, you start looking at him and Marilyn Monroe and all the women and everything else. There's complications there. And you can look at any person who has made an impact. There's just, and the same with Abraham Lincoln, not running around on his wife, but, just some of the things that he had to deal with. And I think that Frederick Douglass, from what I've read, had a tremendous impact on him at some critical times.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, and we're going to go to break, about Kennedy. Even though he did have his flaws, at least he did have some good-looking women. I mean, can you imagine Monica Lewinsky actually doing, Playboy? Not a pretty thing. Okay.
For a break, Vincent.
We're going to go to break because my pastor watches the show. So I don't want to get into anything that he's going to call me and make me repent on. So we're going to be right back with Dr. Walter Milton Jr. and Joel Freeman. And the name of the book is Black History 365. We'll be right back, and this time it's got to be like 30 seconds.
Your small business struggled through the pandemic to stay afloat. You need more exposure. Radio and printed ads are good for pet liners. Television commercials are overpriced. Social media ads start cheap, end up expenses. You need an ad team that can get you multimedia exposure. You need MyTV. MyTV will develop a commercial tailored to your business. To get your maximum sales, contact sales@theratemytv.church. Your
Welcome back. Now, I'm with Joel Freeman and Dr. Walter Milton, and the book, The Love Letter to America, is Black History 365. So let's lead off with you, Dr. Milton. Where can people get this book? Because I've been telling people that I'm doing the show with you guys, and I'm getting pastors and elders and all the AME historians. They all want this book.
Absolutely. Please visit our website at B as in black, H as in history, 365.org. That's BH365.org. And I encourage you and I beg you to visit our website. It's very interactive, but it also gives you a step-by-step process of how to get the book in your hands. We even have the book in ebook version as well. And we have other resources on the website that really aids and support our major text.
Okay, Joel?
Yeah, I would just say in closing that Augustine said back in the 4th century from North Africa, he said, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And I think that is something that, if we practice that for 30 days with our spouses, with our kids, with people around us at work, with folks in our faith community, the next door neighbors, I think that it can really change some things. Doesn't preclude the need to be understood, doesn't even guarantee we will be understood, but I think it's the best way to go through life.
Well, first, I want to thank you guys first for, I'm sure Chaz thanking you because he's on overtime, our producer. But I want to thank you guys for writing this book. It's interesting. It's it's engaging. The graphics and the artifacts and all the illustrations really make it a huge page turner. You know, this is the Black history that you should have learned in school and you always wanted to know. This is the Black history that you should be teaching your children to increase their level of self-esteem and let them know that they have a huge, rich history and contribution in building America. And I'm hoping to have these guys back on so we can talk about that too. By the way, we haven't even covered 10% of the questions that I wanted to ask them. But one of the quotes that my father always made me remember and understand is that those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat its failures. And the history of African Americans are one right not known. Now we talked about the systematic way in which it was guarded, shielded, minimized, and we also talked about the corporation of white supremacy and how they really don't want you to know your contribution of history. And you know what? We can't rely on the government to solve all of our problems or provide the education that's needed for us and our children. Buy the book, read the book, tell a friend to do the same. This is something that everyone should know. And believe me when I tell you, this book isn't Afro-American centered, Black power, fist raised in the air and fight the man. This book is more of an understanding of the truth on both ends, because there are parts in our history that, you know, was not so clear, not so clean on both sides. And this book brings that truth out. So if it's God's will, I'll be with you tomorrow to discuss some of the important issues in our life. I'm Vincent Squire, and I want to thank Dr. Walter Milton Jr. and Joel Freeman for bringing some Black history that, you know what, we didn't even know. Thank you, Errol. God bless.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Your small business struggled through the pandemic to stay afloat. You need more exposure. Radio and printed ads are good for pet liners. Television commercials are overpriced. Social media ads start cheap, end up expenses. You need an ad team that can get you multimedia exposure. You need MyTV. MyTV will develop a commercial tailored to your business. To get your maximum sales, contact sales@theratemytv.church